Jesus was murdered. I'm not sure we say that sentence enough. Now, did he know he was going to be murdered? It sure seems like it with how the gospel writers tell the story. I mean, he does predict his death at least 3 different times prior. Did Jesus have to die? Well, there would be no resurrection if he didn't die. So overcoming the grave is part of the deal with Jesus. And the resurrection of the dead, it's part of the overall plan. But did he have to die the way that he died? Did he have to get flogged, hung, and crucified? Now that's the important question. I think we assume, like always, the answer is yes. But what if Jesus would have lived 30 more years? Now, I'm really not trying to mess with your head here, but I want to be quite clear. I do not believe that Jesus masterfully orchestrated the events that led to his death. I believe Jesus was murdered by self-centered, scared, egotistical leaders who represented law and order. If cooler heads would have prevailed that Good Friday night, then Jesus would have been right back out there, preaching more sermons and healing more people and confronting more Pharisees over all of their hypocrisy. But the thing is, cooler heads didn't prevail, and so Jesus was murdered. Now, Jesus was always going to die, and there was always going to be a need in a resurrection. I am not arguing that. I hope you can split this conversation out. I'm not saying anything about the resurrection or what was in the mind of God or not in the mind of God. I'm talking about what was in the mind of the people. They chose to kill Jesus. They wanted him dead. And so I'm asking you to answer this question. Why do you think that is? Why did they murder Jesus? And by they, I mean the politically and religious elite. Now remember, the context we are in is Holy Week. This is around Tuesday. We're days away from Jesus dying, but no one in the crowd that he's speaking to, not even the Pharisees he just spoke to, know that he's about to die. So why did they murder Jesus? Matthew 23, verse 1. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat." Now we'll stop here. So the audience has shifted from last week. Jesus was talking to the chief priests, the Sadducees, the scribes, the Pharisees, the elite. Those were our last 3 sermons. Now he's turning his attention to the crowds, to the people. Look at verse 3. "Therefore, do whatever they teach you and follow it, but do not do as they do. For they do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on the shoulders of others, but they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them." I think teenagers today would say, "Oh, snap." I mean, Jesus is literally saying, do what they do, but don't do as they do. What they say, but don't do as they do. And so listen to this insult again in verses 3 and 4. They do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, lay them on the shoulders of others, but they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move those obstacles. I mean, think about the money changers in the temple that happened 2 days ago at Palm Sunday. They were forcing poor families to pay a fee just to sacrifice something to God in the temple that apparently Jesus is now telling us they didn't even need to sacrifice. Jesus is calling out the hypocrisy and the economic injustices when he says they tie up heavy burdens on people. They're making life hard for everybody. They're creating unnecessary hoops for the poor to jump through, but they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move those obstacles that they conveniently placed on them. Wow. Verse 6. They love to have the place of honor at banquets, the best seats in the synagogue, to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have people call them rabbi. They love the attention. the gaudiness of everything. It goes well with their ego. They think they deserve to be on full display. And all of this is a detriment to their souls. Wow. Verse 11. The greatest among you will actually be a servant. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. Wow. Jesus is demanding that new moral center must emerge within the religious leadership. A new religious authority needs to resurrect. And this new leadership will be built with more humility and less pride, more empathy, less hypocrisy, more inclusion, less oppression. And it will come from the people, not the elite. Verse 12, all who exalt themselves will be humbled. All who humble themselves will be exalted. So if you've ever wondered how Jesus did enough to be murdered, you look no further than here. It's really unbelievable what happens in this text, and we've only read the first 12 verses. They're incriminating in and of themselves, but if you keep going in Matthew 23, it gets much worse. Jesus isn't done. He pours it on during this public address. I want to show you. Verse 13. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You lock people out of the kingdom of heaven, for you do not go in yourselves, and when others are going in, you stop them. Verse 15. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cross sea and land to make a single convert, and you make the new convert twice as much of a child of hell as yourselves. Verse 16. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the sanctuary is bound by nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the sanctuary is bound by the oath. You blind fools. Verse 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint, dill, and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, like justice, mercy, and faith. Verse 25. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Verse 27. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside look beautiful, but inside they're full of the bones of the dead, of all kinds of filth. Verse 33, you snakes, you brood of vipers, how can you escape being sentenced to hell? Wow. It's quite something when you hear all of these statements in a row. There's so much here that I cannot adequately summarize all that Jesus unloads on the crowd about the religious elite. But you need to go back and read it because it's blistering. But I think I can summarize what we need to take away from this. So I want to give you two. First, when you go up and against the established order and you challenge their authority, judgment, morality, and even salvation, you will face the fullest extent of their wrath. Here's the present day example. Just a few weeks ago, American military were deployed into American cities to shut down protesting. In Portland, unmarked vans with American military not in uniform were capturing protesters. It was wild. I mean, tell me Jesus would not have been disgusted with that. I'm by no means the authority on what operational military tactics are. And I'm definitely not trying to make a political case about anything. But we still see examples of the established authorities being challenged from the crowds and then the elite using force to stop it. I see no other way to see this. I mean, what's happening in pockets around the world today, it happened in Matthew 23 back then. Jesus was protesting here with the crowds. He was causing a stir. He was challenging the system, calling out its hypocrisy, and he was murdered for it. But the elite were too egotistical to realize something. By killing Jesus, they fast-track the emergence of this new kingdom, which ultimately is to be led by a new set of religious leaders, the humble ones. You could say their pride was the death of them all. We need to make sure that that is not true for us. Now, secondly, what we must take from this is Jesus is telling the crowds, those who really deserve Moses' seat are the humble, the ones who understand not just the letter of the law, but the spirit of it too. Those who care more about justice and equanimity and love and mercy instead of self-indulgence, arrogance, and pride. Now, my Nashville roots are about to show here, but there is no contemporary artist that says this any better than Tim McGraw in his 2015 hit song that ends like this. Don't take for granted the love this life gives you. When you get where you're going, don't forget to turn back around. Help the next one in line. Always stay humble and kind. The emerging leadership of God's future kingdom will be the humble and kind. Period. It will not be the powerful or the elite. Jesus declares in Matthew 23 that there's absolutely no place for hypocrites in leadership in the new kingdom of God. And just by uttering those words out loud were the nails in his coffin.